Welcome to another episode of the Bhandwagon podcast. And today is a fairly unique guest that's on. It marks the culmination of the first father and son guest that I've had on the Bhandwagon. Without further ado, welcome to Kullar.
Ricky, thank you for having me. That's a sick introduction. Um, I feel mad like imposter syndrome right now for even being on.
I'll
Like, yeah, go on.
I'll give you the rationale. Yeah, I'll be listening to your stuff, and I thought this kid is gonna. Well, I'll say kid compared to me, right? So, I said he's got the potential to blow up massive. So I'm gonna try and catch him on early on his journey before he turns Hollywood.
No chance, no chance of that. No chance. I appreciate that. Yeah, I didn't realize you were listening to my stuff because I've been listening to the podcast for time, and obviously I've always taken you as like a dipsy, a Punjabi head, which you are as well.
Yeah,
But I really, yeah, appreciate that.
man, it's all right, right. But also, and I'll be honest, I kind of rep the ends for a long time. So I talk about Handsworth, and you've done an EP with a very famous road in
Yeah,
Handsworth, which is not so road.
yeah.
And it'll be criminal if I didn't get you on as well.
No, I appreciate that. I knew, yeah. I remember your podcast with Gopal, and you two were like reminiscing about like bus routes and stuff like that. And I thought, yeah, these two know.
Yeah, that was you don't realize because sometimes when you speak to people, you don't realize how far these conversations can go. So sometimes when you kind of upload these things, you get an idea of where the podcast gets listened to. So
Mm.
like I've had like people from like Costa Rica, Romania, and they're all listening, and I'm like, how the hell is somebody there gonna know about the number 11 bus route from Handsworth to
Yeah,
wherever?
you know, it is like people will just listen to if there's like a vibe going on in the podcast and there's a nice sort of just a free flowing conversation. People will listen to anything. Like I'll listen to before I was even properly like deep into hip hop or even like say basketball or NFL or whatever. For some reason, I'll listen to podcasts when they're talking about basketball, or NFL, or NBA or whatever, and it's like, whoa, this is kind of vibey. I have no idea what you're talking about, but it's quite funny. It's quite relaxed. It's chilled, and I don't know, like ears just kind of perk up when you hear that.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Because if you think of your own if you look at your YouTube algorithm,
Mm.
it's obviously it adapts to what you're used to. But it's so like you could be listening to a subject matter and then it just goes missing, and then out of the blue it comes back again. And you're like, oh shit, I used to listen
Yeah,
to that. I've got like
yeah,
wrestling, I've got other
yeah,
podcasts, UFC, Man
yeah.
United, loads of different stuff that's on there. And then I'm like, then like the UFC stuff goes missing, and the Bhangra's are in there. And then it'll be like, then it's weird, isn't it? Because sometimes if I'm like looking, if I've done a podcast with a guest, all of their stuff starts coming on, and I'm like,
Oh
oh, okay, I get it.
yeah,
So the algorithm is too, it's too lively to kind of like, it's hard to live
it
a
knows
life that
you
is clean.
right. It knows you like it will know you inside out. Like one little search or whatever. I remember looking through on Instagram, you can go through what the app actually thinks of you, like what your interests are. And I
What?
remember, yeah, like if you go into the settings and you look into like the data collection stuff, all that privacy stuff they keep like hidden away kind of thing. I remember going through it and it was all based on stuff I like. And it was like all the football stuff I like, all the wrestling stuff, all the music stuff. It was like a trip because it was you just keep scrolling and scrolling. And then obviously you go to the explore page and it's exactly that kind of stuff. And it's like every single thing you like or comment or whatever, it's like building this image of you in that app, and they can just keep going and going and going.
So you're kind of giving an idea. I've already got an idea of some of the stuff into, but in terms of like to make that grow, when you were a kid, like you come. So your dad, let's just get it out of the way at this bit. So your dad's Tubbsy, UK legend, been on the podcast before, responsible and being part of the UK Bhangra scene, for a very very long time, and had an influence. I mean, like, um, growing up in a family environment like that, which is so heavily musical in that way, what impact did that have on you?
It's a big one. That's like everything to me. I know I tried to like keep it. hush hush or whatever. But that background and where my family's been and where I've sort of grown up in, that's everything to me. But at the same time, and now I look back on it and I can see it clearly, dad never forced anything on us. It was more like, for example, I used to go shows with him every week. And I remember so like clearly growing up, first it was DCS. I remember going in the van with him. He had his glasses on. We used to go DCS shows, like weddings, whatever, whatever. And those tracks, those albums of like Live With Me, but not just that, like in the van, the stuff he was playing on the way there, certain Alap albums, Hira, Sardul Sikandar, all that stuff is just sort of like stuck with me kind of thing. And then later on, when he switched to Jazzy B, like I know those albums inside out. Those two that like obviously the 90s heads, they say Jazzy fell off or whatever. Those 2000s albums, I
Don't
know.
you
In.
ever say that again.
I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it, but there's enough people out there just go, oh yeah, after all Giddy or whatever, yeah, Jazzy lost it. But like I'll know inside out kind of thing just from like being with him at the shows. And that's like a different level of experience that, just sitting down and learning, you can't get that. Like that's like a whole different learning environment for me. And this is at a point where he's not teaching me how to play. He's never really taught me how to play, to be honest. Um, and I wasn't really listening to it in my own free time. Like I was like virtually listening to zero music until I don't know, I was 13, 14. And at that point I just started listening to hip hop and whatever, whatever. But up until that point, I'd say the only real influence that being in that background had was just like a lived experience, I guess you could say, like being there and seeing it and it's sort of just, I don't know, just soaking it in kind of thing.
I mean, like, did you ever become kind of complacent because of the kind of people that you're like? There's a difference in it. You when you see
Mm,
people kind of an inside circle when they're in musicians and when they see an artist kind of relaxed, you see that and the way they kind of let their guard down. And
yeah.
some of them are horrible, let's put it that way. And then
Mm,
but when you see some people like you also see which ones are kind of genuine as well. Did you kind of like you're seeing another mask, another face to that? Did
yeah.
you kind of have to have that judgment made pretty early of saying like, dad, like your dad's it's something your parent can't teach you in that way? How quickly were you able to kind of build up that skill?
I'll give an example. Yeah, this is the most embarrassing like anecdotal thing ever with Jazzy B. Right, every single show we went to when I was a kid, every time I saw him afterwards, I'd burst into tears. Like I'd see him, he'd say hello, I'd cry on the spot, and this was like I don't know, 3, 4, 5 years straight, like every week this happening. I don't know, I'm like 8, 9. And when it got to 10, I guess like my dad was just like, "Nah, I'm not taking you anymore." And I was crying every single time. And to this day, if I'm not crying now if I see Jazzy B, but if I see him now, I still get that like I don't know. There's like a weird aura around him, and there's a weirdness around him. And the only thing I can say that can be down to is with him. He's the most genuine, like straight up bunda I've ever seen, and he's just I don't know. Like, see, I guess like as a kid, I couldn't rationalize it, kind of thing of like, oh, he's right there, and he's just talking to us, and he's just like chill. But that's Jazzy B, and but with other people, it was a bit of a I don't know, like a learning curve, and it still is when I'm like encountering people with dad on the road. And so, say for example, we had Surinder Shinda around last week, and I'd heard stories when I
As
was
you
at
do,
uni.
as you do, yeah, yeah, yeah. Soon this shit
Yeah,
does right, yeah.
I heard stories around when I was at uni. He came around about 2 or 3 times, right? I say this with all due respect. Well, he's not gonna. I don't know. Maybe he will listen to it. I don't know. But he's a bit of a, I don't know, like a bit of a diva, and he's a bit of a rock star kind of thing. And like late night, getting my mum to cook food, and my mum cooks it, brings it in. He's like, "Nah, I want Mackies." Genuinely, like, I want Mackies now. And he's like, he's forcing whoever to go drive down to like Newton Road Mackies, brings back like chicken nuggets or whatever. And he's like, "Nah, nah, nah, I don't want chicken nuggets. Actually, I want this, that, and the other." And he's like that proper serious level. Now I can look at that, and he still has like the banter, and he's like whatever, whatever. I can look at that and be like, okay, that's one type of guy. He's not malicious. He's not like an evil guy, but I'm learning on the go kind of thing when I'm like interacting with those
You
kind of
know,
people.
you just saying that story reminded me of the first time I met him, and he was at Radio XR, and he came in and he just asking. At that time, it was like orange pay as you go, and you get the cards, the scratch off cards. And back then, he needed to phone home, and he had the geezer with him in it. And the guy, he goes, I need this, get me some credit to the guy. And the guy goes like, how much? And he goes, £150 worth.
Right.
Like £150 worth. I was like, like, who the fuck is this geezer ringing? You know what I mean?
Like a 5 month
Yeah,
contract.
yeah,
Innit?
but the guy, like, he controlled the room. He's got that aura around him, and it's like, is I'm guessing like that show speed. Is it that guy who's just fanatical about Ronaldo?
Yeah.
I guess we're like that with Jazzy. You know, I've met him, and like, and he's a proper chilled geezer. He's like
Yeah.
that one, and you could kind of there's a human side of stuff, but then there's people who I've seen like even lesser artists and DJs and that who think they're something special. I said, mate, you're special in this leisure center because everyone's listening
Exactly.
to music, but
That's
you
the
ain't
thing. Like,
nothing when you
yeah,
go into the car park.
yeah, exactly. No, like with Shinda, I get it. It's Shinda. He's
Yeah,
larger than life.
yeah,
I've got like how many vinyls like of his. I'm like, whatever, and it's like you do whatever you want to do, but you meet those B level, C level, D level artists that are like just full ego, want the pump, and like as dad has, I've seen them come and go as well. Like I'll go to shows one week, then a couple years later, I'm asking them, "Where's he gone?" Like I want people to like think in their heads who they've seen on the wedding circuit that they haven't seen in 5 6 years. There's
yeah,
enough of them. There are plenty of them that had like I don't know 12 strings of one like of hits that sounded exactly the same, and now they don't exist anymore.
yeah.
And that's not because their music wasn't hitting, because people don't want to work with them. Like they've burnt enough bridges, and that side of your personality it goes, and that's why with Jazzy, the longevity for me just comes from he's built up good relationships with everyone, and he's not done it like intently, like oh I'm just gonna be Mr. Nice Guy to everyone. He's just a nice bunda. I don't like, and you see that, and I guess I guess for some people, you know, people that have that ego and that pump, and they had the longevity as well. But 9 times out of 10, you get found out, and
But you know that
yeah,
even with the 9 times out of 10, is that those nine is like don't meet your heroes or don't like because it kind of lets you down.
yeah,
You end up talking
100%.
about only the few that were like, yeah, actually, you know, something they were pretty sick, man.
Yeah, 100%. There's a few experiences where I've just been like to dad afterwards, like, nah, this guy, this guy's full of himself, and this guy's just I don't know, off his head.
It so you know, like in terms of your musical journey, you've kind of given the atmosphere. You've met you could clearly tell that you're like your own decision maker. How you done? You got that relationship with your dad and whatnot. Did you was it a first choice of going into kind of the music way? What kind of instruments did you play or what did you do?
Um, as a kid, all I remember is just sort of like tapping my thighs kind of thing, and like tapping whatever tabletops or whatever. But again, there was a combination of dad not forcing it on us, and dad also just not even having the time really, like to just sit down and have that full on like a star shigiddi kind of relationship where he can fully teach you what he learned. Whereas he had that opportunity when he was a kid, and he could fully do that week in week out. And me personally, I was like, if I'm not learning from you, I'm not going to learn from anyone, kind of thing. And over time, that shop just went like I wasn't I wasn't really interested in playing tabla, dolki, dol. We had a little dol group in Derby, Team Raw, that my dad used to teach on a weekly basis. Even then, like after a while, I was one of them ones where you become a teenager and you're kind of rebelling kind of thing. And I was just telling my dad like, nah, I've outgrown this now. Like, I don't want to go. Like, what's this to me? And at that same point, my taste kind of shifted, and I, I probably didn't listen to a single bit of Punjabi music from, I don't know, 2013 till 2019, really. Like just purely hip hop, whatever I could get my hands on, kind of thing. And at that point, again, it was just confined to just playing on my hands, playing on like tabletops or whatever. And it's only recently when I've started like experimenting with making beats, and it's come back to me, kind of thing. And I've realized like that was still there, like subconsciously, kind of thing. That
Mm.
groove or the stuff that my dad was teaching, really like low key kind of thing. That's still stuck with me. I said on the Friction show the other day, I mentioned how my dad used to play Under the Influence quite a lot. And there was one track in particular, Mil de Yard, where Zeus, I don't know what was going on in that studio, where they've got that double R and that like that groove just like pulsating throughout the song. And he's put like some reverb on the top end or something. And it's like just floating in that track the whole way through. And I remember listening to it as a kid. I remember listening to it as I was growing up. And then when I went back to Punjabi music, listening to it again, I was thinking, yeah, my dad knows, like he knew what he was doing. Like he might not have been teaching me the ropes and like all the balls or whatever, but the groove and that intangible kind of stuff that was being taught to me in a real distinct way.
It's pretty because it's like you often see kind of in comparisons in like we'll go back to kind of sport and football, or where you see like a really successful father, and then the son is almost there to try and take on the man, and always trying to fight this thing, isn't it? It's like it's not.
Mm.
It's just natural bit from there. I want to jump ahead slightly and then go back to your bit
Right.
to make this point, which is when I listened to your EP, there was absolutely nothing of your dad in there at all, because it was, you know, it was so raw in the hip hop like kind of uh, New York sound, um, really rough in terms of like some of the sound. Where I was thinking drops would come in, not there. Another sound would come in, and you could just see this is like pure kind of raw early hip hop kind of, you know, vibe. That's the vibe from it. I'm not a hip hop expert, and I'll say it at this point, but that was
Yeah.
the experience got from it. So did you feel you had to do something completely to the other side, the extreme, to kind of you talk about the subconsciously kind of kick that off your shoulder? Because I haven't, like, I ain't come to do this because of your dad, for example. It's from his raw talent, and you know, that's
Literally.
there to kind of like. I'm thinking, this guy's from the air, from the ends. He's whatever he's doing, and it's caught my attention. Very
Mm.
rare I can say that. There, I hear something, I'm like, I need to go and hear that back again. You know, just for the music. You know, I just want
Right.
to hear that back again.
I'd say that part is conscious of making something different and making something creative. But making something different to my dad or doing nothing like my dad's ever done, that's purely subconscious, I'd say. That was never like a, because if I could play like my dad, I would play like my dad. Like
Yeah.
if I could play a dolky like my dad, forget beat, I'd pack it up today. I'd like throw my laptop away, I'd throw it, my hard drives away, whatever. I'd do that. But very early on, I realized I was watching my dad, and to this day, where I'd say he's better today than he's ever been. Like no question about it. True School said the same thing to me as well. He called me out of the blue randomly, and we just randomly like talking about percussionists, and he was like, "He is the best today than he's ever been." Like, forget, never mind the Thorlux, whatever. And I've seen that like close up, and to be perfectly honest with you, it's intimidating. It's like it's scary. It's like my hands can't do that. How like how does he do that? And I know he could teach me a million different things, but he would never be able to teach me that because he picked up the Dolki. You heard it on the podcast. He picked it up when he was like however many years old, and that's all he dedicated his life to. If I can't do that, why would I even try and
Mm.
like match those levels? If I can't be the best at something, I'd never want to do it. And the way I saw it was the way I've just trained my ear over the years without knowing it. The thing that I can be the best at is this. It is beat making. It is sample chucking. It is doing something different. And for many, many years, I told myself, I was like, I need to be doing something different in Punjabi music. I've heard like you've already heard True School do what he's done. You've already heard Panjabi MC do what he's done before that, Death Jam, etc., etc. How do I bring something different to that? And really, there was no like concerted plan of it's got to be completely different to my dad. It was just it's got to be completely different to everything. So I'm glad that comes out on the EP and like my tracks because it was more of a two-step thing of I don't want to do the same thing my dad's done, but I also don't want to do the same thing that anyone else has done, if that makes sense.
So you've made a clear distinction to go towards kind of the production side of work around there. Um, at what age did you start thinking about that? I'm very picky when I ask guests around about age stuff because I try and kind of frame it in terms of what what
Yeah,
I was like at that age. Majority of the time, I'm a prat and an idiot, but
yeah.
this also for like comparison of what other people at that age are doing.
I'd say if I had to like pinpoint a particular time, one age I can give you specifically, one age I can't
When
give you
did you stop
specifically.
crying? Basically, with with Jazzy.
Hasn't stopped. But with like thinking about making beats, I can't give you a particular time because if anyone that's ever like listened to hip hop for an extended period of time, you'll have two thoughts in your head. I want to rap, I want to make beats. And you realize quickly, like you'll either be able to do one of them or probably neither of them, right? And I realized I couldn't rap. So I was like,
Did you
I want
try?
to make beats. I
Oh,
tried.
fair enough.
But with beats, it was just like a fascination of just watching YouTube videos of my favorite producers and how were they making it? Like, how did you get such a sound? Like, how did you do this? It wasn't like I want to do that. It was more, how did you do it? And there's loads of crazy videos out there. But one series was the Rhythm Roulette series, which is basically they take a hip hop producer, blindfold them, put them in a record store, and they have to pick out three records sort of blindfolded, go back into their studio, see what the records are, and use a sample on each one and make a beat out of them. And I remember thinking, like, how the what's going on here? Like, that was my first introduction to vinyl. I had no idea what vinyl was. Then, like a vinyl player, like how you plug in your vinyl player into this machine thing in the middle. Then you have like an MPC. I'm like, I was completely like glued. But even then, there was no, oh, dad, can you get me one of these? Can you do this? Can you do that? It was just more, I don't know, a fascination with it. It was only really um, in my 20s, like I literally hit 20. Um, no, I was 19. I was 19, exactly 19. Um, that I started making beats. So this was March 2020, February, March 2020, that I invested in. I haven't got it here, but this like small MPC programmer thing, just because that's what I'd seen other people do. Like I had no idea what modern producers were using. I just knew what Pete Rock, DJ Premier, or whatever were using. So I got one of those, hooked it up to my laptop, and just started making beats. And that was like, I didn't know how to program drums, didn't know how to like load in drum samples or whatever. I was just sample chopping completely. And that's kind of where it just escalated. Like my first beat are still on SoundCloud. So if you just go all the way down to the bottom, my very first beat I put on there because it was like a really conscious decision of I want to put them on there so I could see the growth in a couple months, in a couple years. So every now and then I'll go back, I'll listen to them, like, whoa, like that's where it first started. And now look what the beats are making. And if I'm feeling low on inspiration or whatever, I can even look back on it and think, oh, that was actually a decent idea. So yeah,
Was
everything.
it purposely done a month before COVID kicked in?
No, say okay. Here's exactly what happened. Um, I'll be completely honest. I haven't really said this to a lot of people, but um, I don't want to make it too deep. But I had like a mental health thing. I had um, suicidal thoughts basically up until that. I mean, I'd say from November, December, and then really for some reason in January it was really kicking deep. And I'm at uni at this point as well, and yeah, it was a bad period. And at that point, I started thinking I need to take a year out. Like I know it's hard to explain to a lot of people, but anyone that has been through it will understand. There's like an irrational side to your head, and there's a rational side, and a lot of times your irrational side is kicking you down, like it is dominating. It's like the loudest voice in your head, but there was still that like rational side of me that was, I guess, keeping me alive, and it was telling me I need to take the year out. I need to. This is. I need to be home. I need to be away from here. And by the time that happened, I guess that was February that that finalized. Then you have lockdown start in March. I think it was end of Feb
Yeah.
March. So I always take that as like the biggest blessing, the biggest blessing. Without disrespecting anyone that um, went through COVID or anyone whose families suffered due to COVID. For me personally, that combination of being at home and having that time to myself and everything sort of paused. It was like being in my own bubble kind of thing, and I really got to zone in. And I'd do anything to have that time back, kind of thing. So yeah, really grateful for that.
Yeah, I don't want to obviously press it in too much in terms of some of the circs and stuff, but like, was it when you're talking about everybody has good and good and bad mental health, and it can episodes or it can kind of fluctuate within it. Like um your educate, you're not just again of a kind of a standard education kind of guy. You've got really deep knowledge in terms of like from your education, like if you don't mind me saying, like you from a Cambridge background, and the work pressures that if you go to even experience it, what the culture's like there. There's like there's an invisible wall of pressure that's coming, and it's a very
Yeah.
strange place, to be honest.
Yeah.
I went there over the summer a few times, and it's always got this vibe to it where you could just see there's this competitiveness just around there.
100%.
Do you reckon it was all of those kind of things combining in there, or am I just totally away from the mark?
That was maybe 60, 70% of it, really. I'd kind of gotten used to it at a point, and in my final year, I'd say like my final year, final exam, your biggest year, the best year of my life, and at the same time, I'm making music at the same time. So I can't say it would completely dominated me, but at that particular point, and I'll speak to that actually with Cambridge. It's a it's a really really lonely environment, like lonely more than anyone can really imagine. Where there's a thing that students know as the Cambridge bubble, where you go in that first week of October and you're there for 8 weeks straight. You don't leave. They tell you like we want you to stay here for 8 weeks. You don't go back home, and it's just intense like work every week. Whereas other unis, I guess it's what 10, 11, 12 weeks. You can really spread yourself out. You have reading weeks as well. So a lot of unis have that advantage, but with Cambridge, it was always every term like it was kind of like a dreading thing where you go straight in, and yeah, that particular term it really hit the loneliness of it. And I'd also made the decision to stay over during the holidays because I mean the work was that intense. Like you had to kind of make up for it if you did slip behind. So I'd stay over in Cambridge, and imagine now like that loneliness taken up to the next level because no one's there. Like however many like people would have stayed, but yeah,
And
ridiculous.
what were you studying in? Was it history?
History,
Yeah.
yeah, history, yeah, yeah. So that's another like dimension to it was history had like zero contact hours where you were just sort of expected to meet your supervisor once a week, get your books in, and just write your essays, like mash your essays out, kind of thing. And yeah, it was like proper burnout. Like at certain levels, it was really intense. But um, with what happened, that was like a large contributing factor. But the other side to it was the other side to it. I can't explain it. Like I really to this day, I really don't know how to rationalize
Yeah.
what I was going through. For like a long period of time, one thing I always felt was like this lack of control, like a lack of agency in my own life, where I felt like things were happening to me that I didn't really have a say over, that I wasn't really controlling, like going to Cambridge, for example, or certain good or bad things happening in my personal life or whatever. It really felt like there was like, and this comes from a purely egotistical, like selfish place where I really felt like that someone was playing like a joke on me, kind of thing. Where it was like I had no decisions over what was happening, and that kind of played with me a lot over that period. And I guess in like a really a twisted sense, I thought taking my life would be like taking agency back, like having control back over my life. Um, yeah, I know it's a bit dark, but yeah,
So
that's kind of how.
I mean, obviously it ends in a positive story because you're here. But in terms
Yeah,
of kind of like your support, what did you do? How did you manage to get through that phase?
I remember I was walking back to my room, and he was like, my head was just getting bombarded with like thoughts on the way back, and it was like a real struggle just to like get up the stairs and get in my room. And I remember being in the kitchen and I was staring at a knife basically. And again, that rational side of your head does kick in. And I called my dad instantly, and I was like, I can't even really like comprehend what I even said to him. It would have been the most blunt way possible. Like that, I think I'm gonna do this.
Mm.
And he spoke in like the calmest, most assuring manner ever. And like the next day, he drove up, and because it's like a 3 hour drive away, like you ain't gonna drive down tonight. But he kind of just calmed me down and got me to sleep that night. And he came down, and I burst into tears like as soon as he got in. And all I remember saying was, "I don't understand." Like I just said, "I don't understand," and cried for like half an hour or whatever. And he's really the one that pushed me to take that year out. He was like, "Listen, forget." Because my mom, obviously, having that Desi background, Punjabi background, she was more like, "When you just finish the year and then you got your summer and it's chilling." Like, so my dad was like, "No, no, like
Yeah,
you
you got
need to."
all day then anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So my dad was like, "No, no, you need to come home." So he really, and the other side to that was afterwards, because you know how family are. Like everyone's asking questions. Everyone was like, "Oh, so why you not going uni? Why you not there, that or the other?" And he, without me saying anything, he'd buy it away and be like, "Oh, it's COVID. They've given the like they've given the chance for you to stay home," kind of thing. He took that on himself to lie and, and protect me, I'd say. So yeah, that
So
that like was a support system for me.
last question I want to just ask on this bit, and then
Yeah, yeah,
because like obviously it's a very heavy subject, and I'm not an expert to speak into this matter, but it's important to kind of highlight it for anybody who's kind of relatable in this bit.
mm,
The Amrit that we're speaking to now,
mm.
what would this Amrit say to that Amrit there in the kitchen?
What I learned over the year, 2 years since then, um, and I really have to thank Siki for this. Really, I have to thank Good Barney for it. Really, um, that thing that I was feeling, that lack of control, learning about Hookem and learning that you can actually lift that weight off your shoulders in real time. Like you can really live a relaxed, stress-free life if you understand that aspect of life. Really, I don't know. It's quite heady, or like it's hard to really rationalize.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
yeah, no, it's like um, just acknowledging that lack of control and then accepting it instead of trying to fight against it. Where at that point it was like, I don't know, in a way, trying to swim against the tide. Where it was like all these things are happening for a reason, and you're here in this position trying to fight against it because you don't understand. You don't understand what's going on. And really sticky and delving into sticky and Gurdwani really taught me how to accept those things. And yeah, so if I was talking to myself, I'd just say accept it and don't fight against it, which is easier said than done. But that's one of those main things that really brought me out of that.
And did you seek kind of the professional help on top of that when you spoke after speaking with your dad?
Yeah, thankfully because of my dad's background, working in like community care and sort of connections he had, he got me in contact with a therapist. I think it was like I don't know 8 9 weeks of like a weekly like hour or so session, and yeah, really it really helped sort of just verbalizing everything and really just saying it. At the start, it was like I'll be honest, I was just lying. Like I wasn't really telling the truth because it was like, oh, you're not gonna understand it, so why am I telling you? Like, but over time, I realized it's not for her. It's not. It's for me to really just get it off my chest, kind of thing. But another thing that people really should, if they are going through that, is jot things down. Don't be afraid to talk to yourself. Like, really rationalize things because in your head, it's out of your control, in my opinion. Like, your thoughts really do take on like I don't know, like a mind of their own kind of thing. But once you say those things or write those things down, you realize how I don't know nonsensical they can be. Like they really become like if you really try like how I've just been doing for the last like 15 minutes, I
Mm,
can't I can't rationalize it. I can't
mm.
put it into string sentences because it doesn't make sense. So that's one of those main things that I really learned from that.
But it made sense to you at the time. It didn't make,
Ex-
yeah.
exactly, yeah.
So are you conscious then in terms of even when you like you're going through, you know, you know, from the way you've kind of described it and hinted it, was that the music was maybe the kind of the medication in terms of like trying to do the therapy around it. Were you conscious that you didn't have that same kind of work ethic around that? Because sometimes you can, my kind of work with addictions over the years, there's always this risk around substitution where somebody stops this one bit and then they just delve into something else. Used to
Right.
be like with heroin, used to be using methadone, alcohol, energy drinks, and all these kind of things. Was there a risk of that for you then as well, that you were kind of going to dive straight into the because you're a historian, you look at lessons of history. What did you was that a viability choice?
I've definitely learned about myself over the years that I have that addictive personality. Um, I don't know how I'd self-diagnose it or whatever, but even the way I started listening to music. So when I started listening to the hip hop rap music, it was like I was on this my own mission to like have an encyclopedic knowledge of it. Like, oh, I need to learn about everything from the late 80s and all the way down to now. When I started really watching wrestling, like I watched it as a kid, and then I remember when the WWE Network came out, I was like, I want to watch every single pay per view that's ever existed,
Yeah.
and I went on a binge. Like, and I don't know where that comes from. I don't know where that like this side of my personality comes from. Same with films, with TV, whatever. Like, I have that side to me, and I was really quite wary of the fact that, like you said, that it could happen with music where um, I could go into it and it just takes over my life, and I don't want to do anything else. And you get, and to be honest with you, I do get those days where I'm like, I spend a day making beats, and I haven't been outside, I haven't had a walk. Like, I'll get up and my legs feel a bit strange, and it's just having that like self awareness or that rationalization where you can be like, no, this isn't the right thing to do, and taking that break and really like learning from it kind of thing. So in the start of it, I was actually pretty scared of it, but at the same time, I also have like this self conflated like idea that somehow gonna be able to like handle it. Like I don't know, like you just think you're stronger than
What
it.
era of history did you specialize in, or your kind of favorite?
Oh, what? Okay. What era I specialized in? In my final year, I did modern American history. So that was mainly 20th century stuff. I did a paper on Indian democracy, which is a very political paper. Again, 20th century, all the way up to Modi, actually. And then I did my dissertation on hip hop and a mini dissertation on violence in Indian democracy, the link between violence and politics in India. And that's probably why it was the most enjoyable year for me, because I really got to like zone in on stuff I like.
channel that aggression. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
Yeah, because it was interesting because I did quite a lot of some of the bits that you did. I did a politics degree. So we looked at kind of like new model social movements,
Okay.
some of the philosophy, a bit of history
Yeah.
around communism and socialist governments,
Yeah.
Cuba and stuff. So
Yeah.
you know, we'll probably have to have a conversation offline just in case we got taken down. Um, okay, so like that's okay. I need to break down a few things what you just kind of
Okay.
said before. So right, wrestling, favorite era, time, wrestlers, go for it.
Okay. I'll say I got two favorite eras, right? My
Attitude's
ultimate
got to be
favorite,
one of them, right?
that's early Attitude Era is my number two. And I say early, I specify early because you still have Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels at their peak, like in that early era. And for me, I've always been like a technical wrestling fan, where I've always like enjoyed the I don't know, like the art of it, really, like seeing their matches and just like being like, whoa.
So that's
And like
94, 95, yeah, pre Montreal Screwjob, yeah.
exactly. So just as that transition happened, and before Austin got hurt, and he had to do like the limited sort of like move set.
Yeah, the rest, yeah. So
Yeah,
pre Owen Pile Driver.
exactly. But my ultimate favorite era is the NXT era from like 5 6 years ago,
Oh, see,
where
I'm out of it at that bit.
yeah,
Yeah, actually, I kind of gave up when
yeah,
The Rock used to do too many cameos coming back. I
yeah,
couldn't keep a pace of it then. And then I was always
yeah,
familiar with NXT stuff and that, but a lot of the documentaries, a lot of the shoot stuff, a lot of the interviews, because I love because inadvertently, you know, how you learn is
mm,
wrestlers are some of the best on the mic speakers that you can get, and
100%.
the way they deliver rarely make mistakes. Very good
Mm,
for anybody who's wants to practice public speaking, believe it or not.
yeah, yeah,
And so I used to kind of watch it subconsciously just for that.
right.
And then so when it started to become scripted, I
Mm,
can't you could kind of tell
yeah,
whereas before it was really off the cuff. And
100%.
so around about I would say just before NXT and stuff that came in, I just lost. I couldn't keep up with what was going down. I'd follow
Yeah.
something if it was like on a pay-per-view. I turned into casual then, but
Yeah, no, honestly, I probably went through the same thing. Like that era, the era that I grew up on, when I went back and like I could actually watch it properly, I'm like, this is naff. Like it's completely watered down. Not only is that character work missing, the wrestling stuff, like
it's
actual
PG.
wrestling,
When it
exactly,
turned PG, basically.
exactly. The PG era was just like, and for me, NXT when it really took off was like a breath of fresh air kind of thing, where they were really like, okay, it was still PG, but the wrestling was on like a different planet. Like guys are wrestling for like 30 minutes, and you're thinking, yo, this is like a this is like a serious like situation right now. And there was like a good stretch of like I don't know 4 or 5 years where that was I wasn't watching like the main stuff. I was only watching that.
Mm,
And that I guess that was really what took me back into watching that 90s stuff. So
mm.
I guess if I was like this same age during the John Cena era and seeing that character work, I'd have a greater appreciation for the 90s character work of like The Rock and Stone Cold and I don't know, like Goldust or something, that over the top sort of like character
Yeah.
work. I'd have a great appreciation for that. But technical wrestling for me is the
So
one.
in terms of Punjabi music, then what's your
Yeah.
kind of favorite era? What you kind of go in? Because I got an idea in terms of your hip hop, and
Yeah.
then I'll get onto influences a little bit later. But from like let's say you're a student of history,
Mm.
um, which you fucking are anyway. But I'm just mean in terms of like these genres, what would you say is
Yeah.
your kind of favorite Punjabi
For,
era?
for me, um, I've got a few, but I'd say number one will always be that late 70s, early 80s. A cliche, but like the late 70s, early 80s folk era of Kullar, Kullar, Shinda, Chamkila, etc., etc. And that's less to do with them and more to do with Jazzy, which is like,
So from so it's rather the actual musical production side of work, yeah.
yeah, God, God level, like God level of music production. There's a reason why, like, physical samples are so extensively. Like, there's a reason why those samples still live on, those leads still live on, is because there was something going on with that guy's head and that guy's hand, where he was putting magic for each one of these artists. And the main thing that, I, in a way, like that, I could link to wrestling. Really, each each of those singers had their own distinct sound base, their own style, their own
Signature.
exactly. Um, where could be best, like the best characterization of it is that Sardur Skandar Roadways Dilari, where he can condense each artist down to their each individual style, and you can tell instantly, oh, that's him, that's him, that's him, because Jaranjit Hujja gave each one their own distinct sound. Where Manak was known for, I don't know, maybe the fast paced Tumbi, Ulgoje, Torki, during the Shinda, that slower, low mandolin kind of flex. Chamkila had his own flex, etc., etc. That was really what drew me into that era. And I remember, like, I still have conversations with my dad, like, on a daily basis. I'm like, how did it go from that to, like, what happened in the 90s, in the late 90s, in terms of the India sound? Because it had such a drastic shift and everything completely changed that it didn't make sense to me, like, for a number of years.
What do you think? What do you think happened?
Okay, if I had to, people are gonna, like, I know there's like actual historians out there that just know the answer to this, so sorry in advance. But I'll always point to Chamkila's death as like that watershed moment, where Chamkila dies for particular reasons. If if you like believe the main theory,
There's loads of conspiracies
yeah, yeah.
that is around, like
I,
what was happening,
I
lyrics,
yeah,
movements,
yeah.
singers, all these kind of things that allegedly all these things that happen.
I'll believe that it was the Carcos in it. I believe that. And to be fair, I don't side either way. Like, I can see what happens. I have a lot of sympathy as well for the Carcos in that situation, in terms of, this is like post 84. The situation is volatile. Like, we can't put ourselves in that, like, in that position where, what were those people in those villages thinking when KPS Skills, like, running his men into those villages, picking people out and killing them on sight. Like, at that, in that situation, we can't rationalize it. We can't put ourselves in those shoes. So I understand it, but at the same time, Chamkila was a bad man. Like, he was like a gangster, like proper, one of my favorite singers. So I think that moment said to a lot of people, "Nah, folk, we got to stop this. We got to stop folk. Really,
So
it's
that
not
was
just
what.
about lyrics." Yeah,
So that was a shift change in terms of folks and maybe potentially lyrics.
yeah.
What would you say was the difference in the production techniques? Because that was completely different, wasn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I think at that same time, the UK just the UK just went crazy. The UK went absolutely crazy, and India could not keep up. In that same year, or around that same time that Chamkila died, Shinda and Gurdas Maan released like disco albums, right? Like proper poppy disco albums, and that sound for me is like Zanchi parody. Like, that's like, they've clearly heard that sound in the UK. They've clearly heard the synth stuff going on. Yeah, we're gonna jack that. We're gonna do the same thing, and it didn't work because, like I said, like, the Hujja had created their stuff, like their sound and their
Yeah.
style. It was set for Hira. It was set for this. It was set for a lot. It weren't set for them. So UK just came down a next level. Like,
But you could
some of
see
the
what they were
lyrics.
trying to do. You could see even now with artists where they're like, "Oh, this is where the money is, and the way they get the big shows and the tickets are being sold. They listen to this kind of music. I'm
Yeah,
gonna release something with this beat and go for it."
I had this conversation like a week or two ago with Vishal and Manraj Khera, like both musicians in the UK, and we were like, why do artists just jump from beat to beat, from style to style, every song. Like, what do you actually gain out of that? You're confusing the audience, if anything. Like, they don't know what your style is. They don't know what
Yeah.
your trademark, your signature is. The only person that has done that successfully since, I guess, Jazzy B really, but the only person like present day that's done that successfully is Diljit, where Diljit's gone from, what he was doing with Honey Sing, then he did Truthful, then he went Snappy, then he does now he's doing the intense stuff. That's like 5, 6 different genres that he just covered, and you don't even know what the next one's going to be like. He's got a Chamkila film coming out. It's going to be completely folk, like, and then after
He's
that he'll go straight back to
he's a
it.
very smart man. He is. He's
Yeah,
got loads of plates simmering in the background.
yeah, exactly. And he's the only bunda that can get away with that, in my opinion. And like the artist that I think that more artists should really look at and take as like what they should be doing is the PropheC, because a lot of these artists today have come and gone, and they've been in the top spot. So if you look at when Diljit was top and Sidhu and Gurren came along, now AP and Shub have come along, and you don't know who the next bundle is going to be. We don't know. But in that consistently through that period, the PropheC's always been like third or fourth. Like he's never been the top guy, but he's always stayed
What are
consistent
you? What
because
are you? Just for kind of
yeah,
clarification, what are you? What are you? What are you using in terms of your criteria? Because if
yeah,
you look at streams and you look at this, like AP, Sidhu now is on a different stratosphere. Yeah, let's just forget.
yeah,
Let's just make that very clear. No
yeah.
one's hitting these numbers. Like it's just ridiculous. Yeah,
Mm.
and I think even it's gone way beyond even like Monday on Tabat. Or he's being talked about everywhere. He's an icon now. So
Definitely,
I'm gonna kind
definitely.
of say bar Sidhu.
Mm.
What's your criteria?
Streams, yeah, I'd say streams and also cultural relevancy as well, because you can always have that one hit wonder like some of that song Dado Badnaam or whatever. Like that's still like one of the biggest like
Yeah,
selling songs
crazy,
ever,
crazy.
but we don't know their names, don't know what they're doing nowadays.
People look
But
saw like Manny Sandy, like
yeah,
consistent high numbers, high, like up there with AP numbers, and
and he dictated that sound as well. Like what he and AP did with that one song, that Madja song, and where AP's gone since then, and like that sample based sound, and then what he's done with Bundle as well. Like there's a lot of overlap happening, and these artists are in conversation with each other, kind of thing. But with obviously the thing, like the reason why I single him out is
yeah,
because he's got his own sound down to a T. And the other main thing is when he does a collaboration with another singer, they jump into his world. They use his sound.
mm.
Sidhu did that Sony Lagade. Like that's a PropheC song, really. He's done an Amrit Maan song. It's a PropheC song, really. Like he never like takes their sound on, but it's like they're aware that he's in his own world. We want to take a bit of that, and that's why longevity wise, he'll outlast anyone else, in my opinion. I'm not even like a massive fan. Like I never really listened to him before the Subdul song, which I just had to check out, and then I thought, wow, this guy's like he's in his own pocket kind of thing, and other artists want to have that, but they're too busy thinking about bottom line or
Do you
whatever.
think that's what it was in terms of like from 80s to 90s to whatever? You
Mm,
had a lot of people who had their own sound. So if you wanted to hear a particular kind of sound, that's
mm,
what you wanted. That's where you would go to. You listen to the Sahoters for their kind of sound, uh,
exactly.
or Suffrey Boys for their kind of thing. Like PropheC's like one of the only ones who's got his own sound. The others may sound a little bit similar, but the ones who are successful have got distinct own sounds. Yeah, is that
Exactly.
what you're
Even
trying to? Is that what you're
like
saying?
yeah, like say with AP, right? He came out onto the scene with a sort of maybe close to like a PropheC kind of sound where it was like trap, R&B, a bit of hip hop as well. And then he went and did that full 180 with Intense, and it's like that dream pop, synth pop, like 80s UK American kind of sound. And he's lived there since. And like you can see him sort of moving here and there with it. But when your number one songs on your streaming sites stay like that, I know for a fact that those artists have it in the back of their heads. oh, I need to do another one of those.
So
To really like,
are you looking at things when you're producing and you're getting an idea, or you're new to the game? Okay, so let's say for a lot of people you've existed in a year, you've come onto into this bit. Are you kind of going there with the kind of analytical scientific approach? Oh, this is what I've got to do, this is how it's got to be, or are you saying I'm just going to be me and be free spirited, create whatever I'm going to do? Or are you actually having, and the realistic answer is it's actually a bit of both? Because I don't believe when artists say, when they say, oh, I'm just doing something different, I'm doing it on my own. Well, that's
yeah,
bullshit, because your marketing strategy means that you're doing exactly the same what everyone else is doing.
exactly,
So,
exactly.
you could turn around and say you got elements of everything within there.
Mm. For me, I do create solely with like my own sort of style in mind,
Yeah.
but I am always paying attention to like what's popping up. Like recently listening to the Argentillo album that dropped, and the songs on there and the styles on there, and I'm thinking, okay, that's interesting. Like he's now the guy that's really gunning for that that top spot kind of thing in a mainstream Punjabi sense, and that's because he's managed to combine in like a post Sidhu era. Like he's got that lyrical side that Sidhu had, but he's also got the clean, more poppy production that say like a Karan will have as well. So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, okay, what's working, what's not working from that, and whether I incorporate it or not, there's always got to be like I always take a step back afterwards and like, okay, how do I add my sound to that?
So in terms of kind of like your sound, who have you kind of learnt from then, in terms of like your your key influences, for example?
I'd say purely hip hop. Madlib is for me the guy. Like this guy, um, late '90s, early 2000s, um, really popped off because you could tell with his production that he was producing with nothing, kind of thing, where you could hear like the rawness, I guess, or like the real primitive like nature of it. And since then, he's like pioneered that sound of um, sample chopping and really bare bones production. A lot of looping happening as well. That you just the real art to it is like asking yourself, how did he do that? How did he loop that? How did he find that loop? How do you think to add this loop to that loop?
Mm.
And for me, that's always been like a major influence. So like with the EP, one moment for me that was like that I felt really really gassed about was on Liquid Swords, the beat break sort of the first or second piece, I think the first piece where it completely slows down. It switches gears. You have a piano sample and you have like a an accordion sample on top, and it's two completely different songs, two completely different eras. And for me, it felt like a jigsaw puzzle kind of thing of how do I make these two match, and then how do I make it come back into the song afterwards without it sounding too clunky or
So that's a
too
style that you kind of like lifted from the.
exactly, exactly. So that's like main influence. But other influences from a Punjabi sense, what was that saying? And free school Punjabi MC, like especially. I remember I heard you talk about it as well. This album. So I'm not saying it all day because you said it, but 100% proof is the
Yeah.
baddest album of all
I
time.
got I get into trouble when I mention how much I love 100% proof, because the purist,
Really?
like, yeah, this, but for me, like, it's only kind of like a personal one, which was where I remember where I was when I first heard 100% proof,
Right.
and it was Marnik singing it. He was singing Koi
Okay.
More, the actual the song. I remember where I was to this day.
Yeah.
And it was the first, it's like it stopped me in my tracks. Like I was a kid. What the hell's gonna stop? Nothing stops a kid in its track, yeah. Apart from
Right.
getting
Right.
blasted and getting in trouble from the parents, yeah. So I kind
Yeah.
of heard that and I was like, oh my God. And then I actually, I was at that point where I was considering I'm gonna nick this tape. You know what I mean?
Right.
But
Yeah.
then I kind of worked out who it was, and then I kind of asked my dad, I go, can you get me this tape? 'Cause I didn't know, I was too scared to go into like shops, like Indian shops, like to
Mm,
buy songs, because they were massive
yeah.
places.
Right.
And anyway, I ended up getting it. And then I just kept listening to it. And then when Grassroots came out, for example, I was starting to play the Dole at that time, and you're just pretending to kind of keep up with Shinda, and while he's doing the percussion, and you got absolutely no chance.
Yeah.
And then I was had a kind of a love for the Dole and stuff. So when I listened to like hearing your dad on like Dole Nagara or anything like, listen to his Dirgit and when he did Dole Love Dole Love. So I was kind of like that percussion side. When you start playing, especially the Dole, when you listen to a song, that's all you can hear first, because that's your instrument that you're just listening. And I couldn't do none of that. But I think when True School came in, it was like it'd been missing for ages. Like when PMC started, there was nobody else like there was nobody. And so when he came in with that sound, it was like, fuck yeah, I felt like that kid again.
Right.
You know what I mean? So even though, let's say, that the hip hop and that kind of choice of music, everyone's moving towards this trap game, and I understand it, I get it. But that kind of style of music is my go-to. That I go that if I go in there, and that's why I think when I heard your bit in there, I was hearing some stuff, and then I was like, oh, the door's gonna come and hit this bit or something, and then I was like, he hasn't, and I was like, and then you appreciate it from a critic to a fan or something like that. You just mature in that way. I was like, he's not conforming to whatever. He don't give a fuck what I'm thinking. It's like, this is what this geezer wants to do, and then you kind of appreciate it in that way. And whether you did that, or I'm giving you more credit than it actually was, but I kind of felt that. And I was like, okay, that's. But you can see a journey, like how it's going to kind of progress, maybe, in terms of it, do it that way. That's why I get you on the podcast now.
With like listening to 100% Proof, what I got from it was the soul of it. Like there was like this, like just completely personal expression that he's brought out using like soul samples, R&B samples that no one has used like before that. No one's used since that. Like no one's touched that. Even True School himself hasn't really like gone so far in that direction, kind of thing. And when I heard that, it was like a mind blowing experience. I was like, how is he doing that? And then I got this like, I was like, how did people react to him at the time when he first dropped Roots, another sellout, all sold out, blah blah blah. They must have felt this like personal connection to him, like, oh, there's this guy doing something completely different, and you could tell his music is his. That's him.
I from a social point, I've never made this point actually before. I've never kind of verbally said it, but with 100% Proof, it was something that was being played in the car, and the Gore Kale or non-Indians could listen to it and say they hear the beat, and then like it combined. It was the first time I listened to like Wham Bam and all this kind that stuff, but this was different. So it was like the way it combined, and the beat just like pushing along, pushing along, and I was like, okay, it just hit together. I think it was just destined to be that. But I think giving those guys kind of credit, the difficulties of how do you follow it up, and then the trajectory in terms of how they've done it and built that at a time where marketing and all social media didn't exist and stuff. I mean, I used to have we used to have D&T, design and technology, and we used to get these art folders and stuff, you know what I mean? I had a massive legalized picture on there, and not realizing, if you ever look at the artwork of legalized very closely again, you see it in a different light as an adult. But I didn't really see those things. I used to see, there's Gurdas man, there's Yamala, you know. So I was like, and I used to have Usual Suspect gig posters. I used to have gig posters in my like folder to go around. But and in terms of kind of your music, then how do you kind of make the conscious decision? Because look, everyone has stolen something from someone in history. We stand on shoulder of giants. It's an inspiration. You hear beats and you hear music. It's always been played before and stuff like that, which is fine, because you've got to interpret that in the same way. Same as someone's doing this podcast and they might ask you the same question in the future, or You know, whatever.
Uh,
You can't
yeah.
be kind of precious in this day and age. How do you kind of make that conscious decision that you're making, that what you want to do is done from it, because you use the sample, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like take with Bulletproof, for example, where I've used one of the most famous drum breaks of all time, Impeach the President, which has been used on countless hip hop songs and then also been used by True School on songs of his as well. I remember being nervous as hell, like making that. And then afterwards, like, I love how it sounds. I know it sounds different, but will Bunda just listen to it and be like, oh, he's distracted from this, that, and the other.
Do you
And
think the
yeah,
Banda cares?
I don't think they care, but they won't give you that personal connection that I was looking for. Um, I'll say this like straight up. When this check one situation came up, I was also aware of the fact that I know people were listening, going, "Oh, that's just a True School ripper." Like of like people on the label, like their music. That was happening. I was saying the same thing. Like I was listening to songs, being like, "Oh, that's just a True School ripper," and that's like a music purist saying that. But say the Bunda, like the normal fan, they were also listening to it and saying, "Yeah, I like this song." Full kudos to True School. They weren't saying like full kudos to like the producer or the singer. He was getting the credit for it because whether they could like understand it or not, they just saw it as his sound. So part of my apprehension, like getting into that situation, was, am I going to be able to do something that stands on its own stands on its own 2 feet, and people see it as mine, as uniquely mine? The way that I look at Punjabi MC's discography and say that's his. The way, in a hip hop sense, I look at Kanye's discography, for example, and I'm like, oh, those albums, those are his. No one can make those again. There's better albums, but no one can make a Kanye album.
Mm.
So can I make something that's me? I
Your
know
own signature in that way.
exactly. I know the EP is not polished. I know it's not the best. Like I listen to it like today and be like, nah, I could have done this better. I could have done that better. But and I released it knowing that it wasn't a 10 out of 10. I know a lot of people sit back and like they wait like ages, like, oh, I need to release the most perfect song, most perfect paper ever or whatever. But I take inspiration from my dad and my dad's era where they were just like having fun, like they were just
Have a
making
go,
songs.
yeah, have a go. Yeah. The greatest
Exactly.
crime is not releasing anything at all.
Exactly. And the way I took it was, as long as I'm putting something out there that people identify with me, I actually want people to see the growth and see the, I don't know, the evolution of me. I don't want to come out with like the greatest album of all time on my first try, and then it's getting compared to that every week. Like people want me to drop another one of those, blah blah
Mm.
blah. I want people to see in real time, like, oh, so this track is an evolution of that, and I wonder what he's going to do next, and they hear a more polished version of me as it goes along.
You called it Grove Lane Tape. Why? Can you just tell people a
Yeah.
little bit about Grove Lane and the area, and why did you use that as a part of your title?
I went to school on Grove Lane, so I went to Hands of Grammar, and for me, Grove Lane is like the linchpin of my life, kind of thing. Like I grew up in Handsworth. I lived, okay, I say Handsworth, but you could say Handsworth Wood, and it like
Yeah, you gotta be careful.
yeah, yeah, borderline, in it, borderline. We'll say borderline.
You're lucky I ain't asking your postcode.
And it was B20, but it was down the road, and it like it was down the road. But like coming out of school, like for 7 years of my life, and like being on Soho Road every day, being on Grove Lane every day, and seeing that culture like up front. I know for a lot of people, it's like it's got a bad rap and it has a certain connotation or whatever, but there's a rawness to it. There's a lot of personality to it, and for me, like above anything else, it has a soul. Like that place has a soul that Bullring doesn't have. Bullring doesn't have that soul. Like if I call my tape Bullring, like it has nothing to kind of thing in it. But Grove Lane and Handsworth has that soul to it. And when I was thinking like, how do I want my music to sound? I want it to sound like that. I want it to sound
Yeah.
like you, even to this day, you'll remember people you've seen on Soho Road. Like they have their own, like you have characters that you remember that you've seen on Soho Road, and it feels like this make believe world kind of thing, but it's real, like and it's gritty. And blending those two things with the tape, it really could only be that kind of title. But
Mm.
yeah,
it's crazy how like obviously I'm gonna be expected kind of like a monopoly board of tracks coming out in a bit, but then obviously you know EPs or albums coming out. You're gonna have to keep it all hands with roads eventually now. You know what I mean?
I was like Nineveh Road Tales. They ain't got the same ring to
Yeah,
it.
yeah, you get it. Yeah, because I was born just off Grove Lane, just 2 roads away. I was one, and then I moved when I was one to I won't say the road, just in case if ever they put a blue plaque up. No. So you kind you've gone through this thing, your EP. You've done the hard job of getting it out. You've done that. You've come out. You followed it with a single again, 3 a.m. Um, just tell us a little bit of that and how come that wasn't put on the EP.
A lot of people ask me that, assuming that I'd had it made like ages beforehand and I just dropped it. It was like a couple weeks after the EP dropped, maybe three weeks or so. Preschool was just like showing me vocals, and he showed me this one vocal. And a lot of them I was like, nah, I ain't gonna do it. Because I'm at the same time, I'm still conscious of the fact that people had heard the EP. The main thing everyone was telling me was this is refreshing, this is different, and like how you said before, what am I keeping track of the analytics or what the feedback is and what people like? I
Yeah,
was keeping track of the fact that people were saying, "Oh, this is completely different." So I'm looking for vocals with that in mind as well. So when he showed me this one, and I was like, okay, the flow is different. It's a bit more down tempo. It's a key that he didn't sing in on the EP. I was like, okay, I could actually work with this. And it was like within, I don't know, a week, it banged out and that was it. And like I remember afterwards being utterly stressed about it because it was like on the project file, there's like seven or eight stems. So just 7 or 8 like tracks on there. And that's it. There's no like I know a lot of people have like 90 stems going on nowadays. I already had that many and I was like asking people like, yo, does it sound full? Like, does it sound all right? Like, is there anything missing? And they were like, no, it sounds good, it sounds good. And a lot of dilly dallying was just sitting there thinking, okay, what do I do? What do I do? And then it goes back to again PMC. Like he said in an interview with Dips Bhamra, he was like, um, he does like 3, 4 tracks and that's it. Like his songs will have 3, 4 layers. That's it, and he's done with it. And I remember hearing that thinking, what is this guy on? Well, we know what he's on, but like, what is this guy talking about? Like this guy's mad. And that that point with 3 a.m. was like, forget it. Let me just release it. Like this is if it sounds
yeah.
good, let's just release it and see what happens. And the feedback's been really good. So
Have you
yeah,
experienced like a bit of a following now that like people are starting to kind of pick up? Like, I'm not saying it in a way that like you don't come across in that start at all. I'm just saying like, have you started to get a bit of a bit of movement going towards you?
I don't know. I literally have no idea. It's like I'm in my bubble again, kind of thing, where like, I'm just making beats in my living room, putting it out, and seeing the response. And I can't really gauge it off like online or whatever. The only thing I can gauge it off is uh, when we announced the EP, I had like 100 followers, like 150 followers, and that's like not the norm. Like you build your followers up over however many months, a year, whatever, and then you release because you know guaranteed 50% of your followers are going to listen to it. That's good enough for me. And then we can build off that and build off that. So a lot of singles will do the covers. Producers might do like remixes and mixes and blah blah blah. I just I just couldn't do any of that. Like it just wasn't natural for me. I thought, why not just put the EP out? Because that way anyone that follows me after this has followed me because of this, right? Like they they've trying to followed me because they like the music. They haven't followed me because they like this one remix or this one beat or this, that, or the other. They've only followed me specifically because they like the EP. And that way I have a strong knowledge within myself that whatever I post, whatever I put out there, people already have that understanding of what my music is and what my sound is. So yeah, I guess it was a little bit tactical in that way as well, but it's just the music really, isn't it?
Mm. So what does the future kind of hold for you then now? What would you say the sort of this question's coming and it's just like
Yeah,
next 6, 12, 18 months.
yeah. Um, with me, I don't work like particularly fast. Like I don't bang out 15 tracks over 15 days, and like I can keep doing that sustainably. It's like you said before, like managing addiction and stuff. I think over time I've got into a position where I don't like a lot of months will go by where I haven't touched my laptop in terms of like a beat making way. I just won't touch it. I won't do anything. But then I'll have a day where I just go crazy and like I make three, four, five fully fleshed beats, and it's like that's good to go. And so in that way, it's really unpredictable. I know
Do
it's
you
like
think?
really unpredictable. Yeah.
Yeah, I really want to ask this question. It's like I think there was a time where you can kind of do that and get away with it.
Mm.
And I mean, get away with it in a kind of respectful manner.
Yeah.
I think because of the speed how some of these artists work, especially India, where they do 24-hour songs or a
Right.
week, they bang it out in there.
Yeah.
Are you worried there's a risk of that where it, like because you've seen some artists that have come, they've had this bit, they've gone on a long layoff. It happens in mainstream, and they try to come
Mm.
back and they've just missed their boat. It's sailed. It's gone.
100%. 100%. I think I'm in this really unique position. It's early doors, so I can't really make like a complete prediction of it or like really solidify it. But I'm in this unique position where I have a sound that if I release it again in 5, 6 months, there's still someone that will be checking for it. And it's
Okay.
not a case, yeah, and it's not a case of, oh, I've released an EP of trap bangers and I really need to like hit while the like the irons hot kind of thing, and I need to keep going. Um, I do think I could take my time with it, but at the same time, I know what you're saying in terms of you really do want to keep like momentum up and kind of thing. And with 3 a.m., like we released it like relatively close to the EP because that was part like that was a decision of mine. I was like, okay, I need to really keep this up.
Mm.
But I didn't know a week before I made it that I was going to do that.
Okay,
Like
fair enough.
it just happened, kind of thing. So whatever happens, it happens. It goes back to like the whole conversation about control and letting go of control. Like I'm not too I'm not too I don't know plugged into the matrix where I'm thinking, all right, okay, he's dropping in 3 weeks, so I need to stay away from that. Okay, maybe in 4 weeks I'll drop this and then I'll do the video here, then whatever. Like if it happens, it happens. And it, because I know people are checking for me because of the music, not checking for me because of anything else, nothing else to it.
Do you ever get tempted to when your dad brings over some guests and that you just say Surinder Chinda had been there, like have you kind of pulled it to the side and go,
No, no. Oh my god,
do you stop bursting into tears?
it's my it's my dad that like really forces it. So when he did the Raja Miller, right? We'd only just announced the EP. Like no one knows me in it. Like I've got like 200 followers, or whatever. He's got his Raja interview going on, like as the band, and midway through the interview, he just stops. He goes, and I've also got this acclaimed young UK producer that's about to come onto the scene with me right here, and he's part of the band today as well. And he's dropping it, and he's giving the full Heyman style promo about me. And like, I'm like, oh crap! I've had to speak in Punjabi on the interview as well, and it was just like he fully does that any chance he gets. Like,
But that's just a
he'll
parent though, isn't it? He's gonna do that. If he
exactly,
can help you anywhere to get like any bits of PR and that they will in it.
exactly. Whereas I know at where I'm at right now, I can't I can't chat to Shinda. I can't chat to him and be like, let's do a song because that's like that's scary. That's next level. How am I going to tell him? Okay, I need you to sing like this over this kind of production, and oh no, don't do that. Let's do this over again. Like he'd be completely in control. And actually, I'll give credit to Aman here for this advice. Um, he just randomly pulled me aside a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, "Yes, how's the music going, boy?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's going all right." And he was like, "So you just what kind of artists you working with?" And I said, "Yeah, new guys." And he was like, "Listen, never don't work with new guys. Always work with new artists, new singers, because these older guys, the guys that are in their positions, that are in their primes or have all the cards kind of thing, they will dictate you and throw you around the room and tell you how you need to do your job. Whereas a new guy, you can mold them, you can dictate your style onto them. And then when I thought about like albums like Brown Shaper 2, which is all brand new artists apart from like Master Slim, it's like it makes sense because he really got to zone in with these singers and tell them how he wanted it to sound.
Yeah,
So that
he's like I had a his podcast is like was brilliant when because he's got that way
yeah,
of giving that advice the way in his storytelling and stuff is I think
exactly.
it's so underrated. Like
Yeah,
he get like I don't mean underrated in that way in terms of like respected. He
100%.
he doesn't get his flowers as much as that he deserves.
He's another guy like Jazzy where you see him, you meet him, you talk to him, and he's just a normal bunda, completely normal bunda. You would have no idea this guy is like produced however many songs and like a million monthly listeners on Spotify. Like what? Where does like? How do you do that?
Honestly, his I think I kind of opened it up when I looked when you go back into
Mm.
his portfolio and you just look at it and go, bloody, I forgot about that, forgot about and he's just like as a machine, like bang, 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 bang,
Yeah.
bang coming out.
All the India stuff he did as well, like that era, that 2000s era, where all those new India singers, Bubble Man, Geeta Dalgar later on or whatever, and they were like, yeah, we need that UK sound, we need his sound, and he was banging out albums like every month, like a whole album, and then doing his own albums here. I'm thinking like, how do you use a machine with it and um getting that like talk from him, understanding it, and then also the sort of like the pragmatic side of it, where he had to compromise in certain situations to get certain things done. But when it came to his own releases and what he was doing for himself,
Yeah.
he knew he wanted that 100% control. And yeah, I thought that was like the best sort of advice I've ever really had, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, like it's such a and the thing is like you're actually demonstrating it in terms of taking it on. Loads of people give advice. It's just actually like what you're gonna do with it.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna kind of come towards the end of it this bit now.
yeah.
So, as you know, this is the bandwagon. So, is there a bandwagon you want to jump on, jump off, or is there anything you want to
So
kind of clear the air and get off your chest? This is your space.
as people could tell by now, I'm a bit of a hater, and I'm like there's a bit of hate in me for a lot of things, and I've like literally ever since you asked me, I've been thinking about what mothers I want to drop out, and there's like too many. There's so many in my head that are going around, but I'm gonna say one specific one because I really just need to get off my chest kind of thing, and whether it's a bandwagon or just I'm just like
Yeah,
getting it off, whatever in it. Um, old head producers, esteemed legendary producers, giving big talks and big tweets, Instagrams, interviews and stuff, saying, "Oh yeah, what these new kids are doing, sample based, this, that, and the other. Nah, it's not good. Like, we need to do 100% live music, blah 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 blah." And then on their own production, getting those same kids that are doing that to ghost producing. The hypocrisy is mad. The hypocrisy is crazy. I don't need to say names. I don't need to say that. I don't want to say names either because that one might get me in trouble. But if you're thinking of a name, Tiga. You know what I'm saying? Like it makes sense if you're thinking of a certain name, and it really like it properly like I'll just say it pisses me off because it's you have like stay with my dad. He will say all of that, but he always adds that like that condition where it's like if you're doing it creatively and you're doing it like out of love for it and is it like an originality to it, do whatever. Like I said, he loves juice. He loves my music. Like he don't listen to hip hop. He don't listen to like any of this kind of stuff. But it's because he knows that there's something original going on. Whereas I'm thinking of one particular producer, but there's probably like five or six that anyone can name. Has consistently badmouthed like that art form and my peers really now, like people that are in my age range.
So
Doing something,
so the particular thing that aggravates you
yeah.
is old school producers criticizing new school producers because they're using samples and splice and all these kind of things, I'm guessing.
Yeah. But
And
then,
and
yeah,
then using it themselves anyway.
exactly. It's like, just practice what you preach. I know. Like, if you're going out there on a limb saying all this stuff and like chatting about like people my age that are trying to do something original to the scene,
Right.
and then turning around and like taking our music, using those same, but they're not just using the samples, not just using splice or whatever, but literally grabbing people by the collar kind of thing and saying, "Yeah, I want you to ghost produce this many tracks for me." It don't make sense to me like that. I think
So
that's
is it
ridiculous.
so yeah, I got you. Is it
Yeah,
so is it so also in terms of like because I kind of mentioned this very early on in the podcast when I used to do it was like I kind of understand them though as well at the same time, which is they've spent 20 years learning the art mastery of percussion and all these other like
yeah.
keyboards, whatever, right? And then this kids come in, got their laptop, absolutely just said, "Oh, I'll take a little bit of that." I'm just sorry, I'm just really
No,
simplifying.
no, 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 no.
I'll have a little
Cool,
bit of
cool.
that, I'll have a bit of that,
Yeah.
put it together, bang, put it out, and they're getting 100 times more of a reaction than the old school guy. And
But
then
yeah,
they look at it saying, "Oh, this is wrong," and then go down the whole purist argument, and
mm.
then say, "Actually, I actually going to need some of that. So come come here, help me out." Is that what is
I,
that in
I
general?
I get it to an extent. Before you get to that last stage, I 100% get it. And if you've got an issue with that sample, because me personally, like what I told you, my favorite era of Punjabi music isn't the garage like scene. It isn't even like the true school era you could call it. It's still that live percussion era.
Mm.
But the people that are saying that and bad mouthing sample based stuff, when was the last time you released a 100% live song or an
Yeah,
album? And
but
yeah,
I think also that again, it's going back. Do you think the public give a shit? They don't care.
but here's the thing, and again, it's really hard not to name the guy, and but for example, with this particular person that's been like jacking ghost producers and jacking samples and using loops for X amount of songs for the last like year, two, whatever. Their last big song was 100% live song. The one song that's hit throughout like this period, the one song that anyone actually knows is the one that has live Dol, live Sarangi, live Algodje, um, a live bass line even, right? Don't have to say like, you know what I'm saying? That happened, that song exists, and that song has probably more streams, more numbers than the next 10 combined.
Hmm.
So the other part I don't get is, I guess another part, like the bandwagon thing is like, it's having no self-awareness where it's like, listen, we know what works. We, as the listeners, we know what works. There is a live sounding song that you have produced that a singer has sang that has, I don't know, almost 1 million streams on Spotify, 1 million views on YouTube. That's a young audience that's pushing that. That's not exclusively just like 30, 40, 50 year olds. I know that from personal experience. Like I talk to my mates, I know what songs they listen to in the car. Like, I know it's still heavy songs. I know what it is. I
You're,
know it's your
you're,
stuff because my isn't it? Like,
you're a wild one, man. You're a wild guy.
but it's true. No, honestly, it's true though. It's true. Yeah,
Yes.
I don't get where that disconnect comes from, and like, God forbid I ever get to a point where
I think
I don't know
I think you
as
raise
well.
such a valid point around kind of
Yeah,
self-awareness.
yeah,
And you got to have those people around you who swear at you and just actually tell you you're constantly shit all the
exactly,
time. Because
exactly.
you need that groundwork. If you start
Exactly.
having just yes men around you and women, um,
Yeah,
you're going to get into a very sticky situation because then you'll actually start spending money on absolute delusional projects, which are terrible.
exactly.
And this is all just my opinion. It doesn't mean
Yeah.
anything. I don't pay their bills. They don't pay mine. It's just, it is what it is.
No, same. And if you look at these singers, producers, whoever, their live set. What are they singing? Are they singing that song that dropped 3 weeks ago? No, they're singing the song that dropped 20 years ago. Yeah, is that live, that real music that you produce with actual heart, that lives on because we can say when that doesn't know Jack or whatever, but they do know something. Like they do understand when something's made with like a purity to it, and yeah, that's no. I shouldn't continue before I get too vexed. But yeah, that's the main thing for me, really.
All right, I'm gonna bring it to a close at this bit,
Please, please.
and then we'll do a director's cut, yeah. And then we'll when your next stuff comes out, we'll definitely I'll get you in person. I'm sorting in some stuff out,
Please,
and then hopefully we
that'd be
can
sick.
do it, man. But thanks, man. Well done. Continue it. All the
Thank
best.
you.
Follow
No,
your
thank
stuff
you for
on
this as
Check
well.
One and do all your. You keep going, bro.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on, man. It's, like,
No
really
problem.
means a lot.
Respect.